Paul, it is so good to have you back on. I was so excited from our last conversation that I was delighted that you were able to come back on the show. It's really good to have you here.
Well, it's such a pleasure to be back, and we had such a wonderful conversation last time we connected. Love to pick it up again.
Yeah, honestly, I could just have sat and talked for hours and hours. I just think that it's the listeners probably would have got bored at some stage. Not of you, of me, me sitting wittering on. But yeah, it's been brilliant. I actually haven't been reading much of Dolores Cannon recently, so I was listening because I know that she's got quite a few things on YouTube that, you know, where she's talking at conferences and things like that. And I've sat and watched a lot of those over the years. And sometimes I'll go back to them again after I haven't watched it for a couple of years. And I see the information in such a fresh way. It makes it hits me a little bit differently. You know, because my own evolution and my own mindset has really evolved as well. And I was listening to one on Spotify. It was basically just the audio version of whatever had been on YouTube. And I was listening to that on Spotify, and it was 2012 and beyond. And that's what she was talking about. And funny, one of the first concepts that she actually talked about was how many times, first of all, that she had 17 books out at that point, and I was thinking, I've definitely not read 17 Dolores Cannon books, so I need to do some more reading. But what she was saying is that there are people who are speaking to her, or were speaking to her around that time, where what she had spoken about, they were bringing up that what she had spoken about, or what she had taught maybe 20, 30 years prior to that, was different to what she was teaching now. And she was very open and honest and just said, but, you know, as we evolve, things change. They change over time, and our mindset changes. We are able to absorb more information. You know, we're only delivered what we can really handle at that particular time. So, of course, our truth at one particular time is likely to change and evolve. And I always really encourage people to be aware of that, just because what we believe today, you know, and we're very firm in our beliefs, that doesn't mean that we're always going to believe that permanently.
Yes, and Dolores herself used a great analogy when addressing this very thing. She said that you wouldn't feed a baby a steak.
Yeah.
And you think about kindergarten children, they're at a certain level of consciousness. We don't judge them according to where they're at. We love and celebrate their understanding of the level in which they're at. And so it is the same with our own spiritual evolution. We get bits by bit. And she had this journey herself. When she first delved into this information, they said to her that she wasn't quite ready for some of the more convoluted concepts. And so, as she used that analogy, you wouldn't feed a steak to a baby. You start them on soft food, and they eventually get onto the harder stuff. So it's kind of a good analogy, I think, of how this whole understanding and our evolution, as you said, Gemma, our evolution has increased. Particularly, it's 2024. We're seeing things speed up. I know you've noticed that in your own work.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Very, very much so. You know, it's funny, whenever I really look back, it's actually, there's some of the Dolores Cannon stuff, whenever I was really starting to get into it, and it was really going over my head. There was a lot of it that I was thinking, no, this is a bit far-fetched. I don't really buy into this. This isn't resonating with me. But as time has moved on and I have revisited that content, a lot more of it has resonated with me at this time. I think I've really just learned that actually I can't say for sure what is possible and what isn't possible, what is real and what isn't real. I'm only seeing it from my perspective. you know, I can't possibly know for sure exactly what is out there. And because I've seen on my own journey how things have really changed and evolved, and I, you know, have come from being a skeptic to, you know, working as a psychic medium and, you know, listening to Dolores Cannon. So, you know, even in my own mindset, I have seen how my own staunch truths have been challenged. And I have expanded my mind. And as I have learned and expanded my mind, I have been given more information that has really challenged how I see the world.
Yeah. Something that helped me years ago was when I first came across quantum physics and quantum mechanics, because particularly dealing with some of the more convoluted information that is found in the likes of Dolores Cannon's books, it gives a lot of credibility and it gives a lens of understanding. When you look at the quantum field and when you look at that, things like time is a construct of the human mind, and outside of this reality, time does not exist. It's very difficult for the human mind, the analytical aspect of ourselves. It's very much conditioned. You become solidified. They call this neuroplasticity by about the age of 35. And we tend to get stuck in our ways and our ways of thinking. And so I think when quantum physics and mechanics came about, it gives a lot of credibility to the works of the likes of Dolores Cannon with her material, because I think they married together quite well.
Yeah. I just think she's phenomenal. She's absolutely phenomenal. It's funny whenever I do a lot of like guided visualizations, and sometimes because I'm obviously a medium and I get a lot of clairvoyant images, and I'm doing that consciously as I talk to people. Sometimes even whenever I'm doing a podcast or having a conversation, my guide is prompting me, or I have someone that is giving me prompts in some way. I can remember being on a date one day and my guide just kept saying, he wants to kiss you. He wants to kiss you. And I was like, oh, so
That's
I guess
nice.
I get these little prompts and things at different times. And, I don't meditate as much as what I need to. However, often whenever I'm going to bed, I'll just sort of close my eyes now, maybe ask for it to be taken somewhere or to be taught something. I go for healing in different realms, and it's all amazing that I can access that without being hypnotized or having to listen to a guided visualization. I could just do it consciously, and I really love that and I cherish that. But I also learned so much information. So I was with someone from the spirit realm. This was just a few days ago. This was very, very recent. And he was stargazing, and he was talking about all the different colors, the colors of the rainbow. And I could just see like this prism of color whenever we were looking at these stars. And he said it's our perception here on Earth that the stars aren't colorful. It's our perception that they sparkle or that they glint of silver. But actually, they're just these prisms of colors. It's very, very colorful. And I thought, oh gosh, that's amazing, just to have my perception again challenged of something that I have believed for all of these years, that actually I'm maybe not seeing things right. Maybe there is a different way to look at the universe that we're a part of.
Well, absolutely. And I think, we perceive such a small band of reality or frequency with our human mind, which is a tool that's part of our human body. But the brain itself, the mind or the consciousness, is far more expansive than the limited brain, which is, I like to use this analogy. We are like a vehicle. Like, think of your car, or I'm sure you've got a car, or most of the audience may have a car. You aren't the vehicle itself. You are the driver, you are the occupier, you navigate that vehicle. Eventually it's going to rust and run out of mileage and so on, and then eventually break down and you'll trade it in for a new one. And so this is kind of like our physical bodies, our physical minds. But the consciousness, I call it the I am, the eminence that emanates or animates the physical body, is the true consciousness in which we are. And so it's the best way I get my mind, at least the analytical aspect anyway, around it. I think analogies are great because analogies, like so many of the great spiritual masters over the years, have used parables and analogies to help explain more convoluted spiritual concepts.
Yeah. And there is definitely still some stuff that goes right over my head. Like you talked about the concept of time, and that's definitely something that I still struggle with. And whenever I'm maybe doing a reading for someone, or I'm bringing information through for the collective perhaps, and I'm being given something, I'm thinking to myself, well, do they know that that's going to come to fruition because it's already happened? Is it happening right now, just on in a different place, or is this just one of the timelines that we're on? It's very hard to comprehend. And as you say, our minds can only understand so much. So my mind hasn't reached the stage yet where I'm able to fully understand exactly how all of that works.
Well, you're not alone, because I'm the same, even though I talk about this stuff, because absolutely what you say is, you know, we know that when we perceive in the now moment, the future, and we know we have choice, you know, from a psychic and a mediumship point of view, that the future is not set in stone, and yet we're talking about time not existing. So it seems a paradox, doesn't it? But once again, it's the limited band of frequency in which we are able to attune ourselves to. However, what I am noticing, and this is the exciting thing, I know you mentioned earlier that this is an exciting year that we find ourselves in. I'm noticing that we are expanding our consciousness, and what previous generations would have accepted as fairy tale, we are now beginning to see manifested. Think of it just technology, for example, or advancements. These devices that we use, the technology we use, would have seen as mythical devices even 2 generations ago. And so things are moving at a rapid rate.
It's very interesting that you bring that up specifically. I had seen somebody post something on Facebook or some sort of social media channel just a few days ago, and it really helped put things in perspective for me in terms of how we have evolved. And it was actually poking fun at the fact that the young girls of today are all about their fancy water flasks. You know, their water flask and their water bottle is just, one of the most important things that they can have on their person. But whenever we were kids, we weren't necessarily drinking water. We were drinking sodas. We were drinking fruit juice. We were drinking, Sunny Delight. We were drinking all of these different things that weren't necessarily as good for us. And yet the young girls of today are all about the water flask and getting their water.
It's a perfect example of a shifting consciousness. Even this happens with every generation. I mean, evolution is, it's very much part of the very fabric of the universe. And actually, the moment something stops moving and growing and expanding is the moment that it's starting to, you think of plant life beginning to wither and decay. And so the very nature of existence is to expand, to grow. And when we look at the soul, what we might call the individual soul, each incarnation does not diminish one, but adds to the totality of their consciousness. And you'll know this, I think we even mentioned this in our last chat, is someone does not become diminished. They don't lose their personality when they move over to the spirit realm. They keep that, and they also take with them all of the lessons and the evolution gained and learned in the incarnation, and it's added to the soul.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that, because a lot of us have fear around that somehow when we pass this out of this physical body, somehow we'll be diminished or we'll lose an aspect of ourselves. I've come to know that is not the case. Obviously, we drop the egoic mind structure or the trauma and conditioning of the human mind, but certainly things like the personality and one's wittiness and charm, they take with them.
Yeah.
And aren't you glad about that? Because, you know, I mean, I've had some wonderful friends and family that have passed over, which were incredibly funny and witty, and you know, I just think it's so much who they were. To think that they would lose that, it's definitely not what I've seen in my work.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. With people that come through to me in a mediumship reading, they seem to retain that personality. Like, one of the people that I connect a lot with is Chester Benson, who was the lead singer of Linkin Park. And he just comes through exactly how you would expect his personality to be based on the persona that you see of him, but he also brings you through these other parts of him and these darker aspects of him, I guess. And it's lovely to be able to form connections with someone like that, who I never had the chance, and probably never would have had the chance, to get to know on the earth plane, and to form such a strong bond. And I do want to call it that, because it feels like I really know him as a person, but it's his soul that I know. It's not his physical body. And it really is emphasized to me the importance of our soul, the importance of the connections that we form with people on the basis of the soul bonds, rather than the physical body and how that might change our perception of somebody. You know, it's like we could meet somebody and think, wow, they're amazing, I have such a strong soul connection, but they're too fat for me, they're too short for me, they're, you know, they don't dress how I want somebody to dress in a partner, for example, or in a maybe in a close friend. But whenever we strip all of that back and we're just left with the soul, it's just absolutely mind-blowing, the connection that we can actually build.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even recognizing, you know, when we meet someone, there's an instant connection, an energetic connection, or it might be something like they seem familiar and yet we can't place them in our life. We know we haven't met them before, and yet there's this familiarity about them. I believe this is our soul when we have recognition of our soul family, or it might be someone from a past life, or perhaps someone that will play a meaningful role in our life, and we'll have that instant recognition. I've always found that with the important relationships in my own life. When I've met people, there is an instant recognition of something different. Yeah. Not everyone works like that. I understand that we perceive things differently. But for me, that was always the marking. So I pay attention to when someone comes in with this, a large energy presence into my life, because I've come to learn that there's going to be a connection. And let me tell you, that can be very challenging, because more often than not, the other person does not recognize it.
Yeah.
And so you feel misaligned with their energy, because you've recognized them in so many ways and feel a strong bond with them, and they're perhaps not even on the same page. Yeah. And so that can be challenging.
Yeah. And also recognizing that just because we feel that energy, we feel that bond, doesn't mean that this is forever. That doesn't mean that that person is meant to stay on your path. Sometimes they come in and it's very brief. They teach us the lesson that we need to know, and then they leave.
That's right. Yeah. And so, you know, it's been said many times, some people come for a reason, some people come for a season, some people come for a lifetime. Ultimately, you know, we're here to learn lessons, aren't we? I mean, this was the premise of a lot of Dolores Cannon's teachings is that this is a school for our evolutionary growth, for our soul's growth and expansion. And how do we learn? We learn through lessons. We learn through tests. Not that we're being tested by the universe. We tend to do it for ourselves because they're lessons that we want to learn. And so if we don't get a lesson, it's like when we go through the grades at school, if we don't pass an exam, it doesn't make us a bad student. I think we get caught in these labels, but we just come back and we'll repeat it either in the life, the incarnation, or perhaps you'll come back in another life and repeat.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people start to panic about as well, whenever they think, no, well, I don't want to come back and do this again.
Well, that's a great thing about free will, isn't it? Because we're creating our reality, good, bad, indifferent, everything in between. And so really, if you're done with a lesson, I mean, I see this with a lot of people I work with in my practice. They attract a certain type of partner, a certain type of man, and they get to the point they're done with, perhaps it's a narcissistic person that is very dominant and controlling, and then they find their power. Mm-hmm. You know, when you change the way you look at things, Wayne Dyer said this years ago, the things you look at change, and you can perceive the narcissist as the spiritual teacher. And when you're done with the lessons that they've got to teach you, you're able to, find that inner power, which often happens with people I work with, and then discard that type of archetype and then move into more positive, nurturing relationships.
Yeah, it's just the lessons are hard, and I can understand why people would say, no more lessons, I'm done with the lessons, because the lessons are hard, but they are supposed to be hard. They're not supposed to be easy. You know, they're there to help us evolve, and I guess it's whenever we show resistance to the change, or whenever we're not recognizing the patterns in our life and we're not changing, that we really make it hard. We make it harder for ourselves. We're our own worst enemy sometimes, and our own worst critic.
Absolutely, indeed. Everything you say is spot on. And you know, I'll be really honest. This Earth school, if you like, or simulation, whatever analogy you want to use, it's not easy. We all recognize that. Even from a personal level, I go through challenges like everyone listening to this and yourself personally. But what I come to learn is that how we grow, how we evolve, how we learn is through adversity and challenge. Now, of course, none of us welcome any of that. And a lot of us have been through a lot of trauma in our lives. A lot of us have been through tragedy. We've lost loved ones. We've had heinous things, some of us, occur in our lives. And yet those of us that do derive some kind of meaning from it, like I did with trauma in my past, I was able to find meaning from the suffering. And, this is a difficult spiritual lesson, but a needed one, and I know one for me personally, one I created in order for my soul to grow. And then the byproduct of that was to have the empathy, understanding, compassion to help other people, because I think if you haven't been through things in life, you don't have the wisdom and the experience. It's very hard to meet someone when they're going through something.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, that's probably one of the biggest lessons that I have had in my life, is whenever I look back over the years of whenever I was more small-minded, more critical, more judgmental, more jealous, more in my ego. And I'm not saying that I'm not those things now. Of course, they're still existing. Like, my ego still exists. I battle with it on a regular basis. Honestly, it takes a whack sometimes, but I am more aware, I guess. of those things, and I try to bring that more into my awareness. And that's really through all of the hardships that I have experienced and the knocks that I have had from the universe, the knocks that I have had in life that have really peeled back the layers with me and given me the chance to change. And I could have taken that and been really bitter about it and, oh, this horrible life, what did I do to deserve this? And I took the option, and maybe it was already in my path, maybe it was already destined, maybe it's what I chose for myself, to choose that path of actually, I'm going to use this in order to change my life, to change my perception of the world, and to help other people with it. You know, and I've sort of taken that burden from my back and I've laid it down at my feet and I've stood on it.
Yeah.
And used it as a stepping stone.
Well, and isn't that the greatest gift, really, when you can use your own story, life, hardship, and be the vehicle to help another find remedy and healing? I mean, this is the motivation of my work, of my entire work now, is to turn my own narrative, my own story, my own suffering into a very meaningful existence. And when you find that, what I call soul's purpose, I believe we all have this. Dolores Cannon referred to it as the eternal question that everybody has, which is, what is my soul's purpose? I'm not talking about career or identity or gender or being a parent, what we have as all of the labels and the conditioning. I'm talking about why the soul has chosen this particular incarnation. And something that I have learned is that, you know, some of the more advanced souls, you'll probably know this, Gemma, is that they pick more challenging lessons and incarnations. And often we feel, you know, I laughed when I heard her share this once. She said, you know, some people seem to just breeze through life. They have everything going right for them. And she said, she referred to it as a resting life. And she said, don't judge those people because you don't know what the life they had just come from. They might have been killed in a war and now they just want to have a peaceful life in between another one. So I've come to learn, you know, this is the great thing. We're certainly living in times where there's a lot of narratives around about inclusion and all of that stuff. And that can tend to get political sometimes. But from a spiritual perspective, what I've learned is when we recognize that we are all emanated from the same no-thingness and we all return to that same no-thingness, regardless of our identity, gender, skin color, sexuality. These are just vehicles of expression of consciousness. And so how can you have prejudice when you understand that the universe itself is vividly colorful? We know, I know this in my work, you probably have had encounters of this. We know there are other beings from other dimensions. So this whole notion of other is an illusion of the human ego.
Yeah, this is such a great conversation.
And yet humanity has been stuck in this, let's say, loop for eons of time as our God is the only true God. Our tribe is the tribe that needs to dominate and control, or even look at genders, for example. The masculine energy dominated the feminine energetic force in the world, and women were suppressed. I'll mention this to you because I'm getting a lot of information on this recently, and I'd love to hear your view on it. I'm seeing this arising consciousness happen more so through females. In fact, the vast majority of clients I work with one-on-one, I would say 70+% are women. And I love this. And even being in a physical male body, I'm not intimidated by this, because when you understand that everything is energy, and, you know, this is what I'm pointing to is an energy, a nurturing energy, a compassionate energy. You know, you look at the female body, it gives life, it gives birth. And this consciousness is emerging and is becoming more pervasive. And now those that are stuck in more of a masculine domination, control, we're seeing this diminish energetically. Yeah. I think they call this the age of Aquarius, a new dawn.
So there's two different things that I want to touch on with that. So in my experience, first of all, those who are more in touch with the feminine energy, because obviously we both embrace the feminine and the masculine energy. We both have the two of them there. But regardless of our genders, like our biological genders, whoever really embraces more of the feminine energy, they seem to be more in touch with their intuitive nature and their ability to connect in with, you know, psychically, you know, psychic information, mediumship. So, and it's quite funny actually, because there is more, more of a pattern with, gay men. Yes. Rather than straight men in mediumship.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? And I have the exact same thing in my work. Almost every single male I work with identifies as being gay or maybe transgender or something within, you know, that community. And I find that interesting because it just seems to be energy, because when we understand we're energy, you move beyond the labels, right? The gender, the body, the physical. So
it's just amazing to see that pattern, and that doesn't mean that it's only, you know, gay men in mediumship. Like there are straight men as well, and you know, men that would identify as being straight, but it does tend to be those people who are more in touch with the feminine energy and, you know, recognize that more within themselves, or maybe embrace it more just within their energy field, maybe possess a little bit more of it. I'm not really sure how to best articulate that. However, I'm also seeing a pattern of, as the feminine energy shifts in that way and embraces this consciousness more and more, that the males and those who embrace the more, I'm just going to change that. The people, those who embrace more of a masculine energy, I don't want to just put the label male on because that's not accurate. But those who embrace more of the masculine energy are starting to follow suit a little bit and start to embrace that a little bit more. But it's very much the feminine that's leading. It's the feminine energy that's leading that. And it's like the ripple effect, you know, and the masculines are then starting on their journeys and taking their steps towards this consciousness, and it's an amazing thing to see. But also it's very, very interesting based on the information that I have been given from Spirit in terms of the times that we are moving into, and the I suppose the prophecies and the predictions that they've given me and spoken to me about in terms of the direction that the world is heading in. And this all probably started, if I maybe take it back about 3 years, like I had been seeing an uprising in the Middle East with women, and then we've obviously had the issue there last year in Iran. But there's very much this feminine power is coming to the forefront. And whenever I'm looking far into the future and I'm seeing the world and how it changes, I'm seeing women being in powerful positions. I'm seeing the feminine energy being in those roles. I'm seeing us using our intuition and mediumship being commonplace. I'm seeing, you know, female presidents, female politicians, female CEOs.
Bring it on.
So it's
Bring it on. I hate to get into labels, but, I think the world would be a much better place if we had more female leaders. But of course, isn't that going to threaten a whole lot of people that are identified with a certain way of thinking? I mean, let's call a spade a spade. There's many men out there that still feel intimidated being. It's either a religious belief. It's interesting enough because, I often talk about this, the people that take the Bible literally. The New Testament talks about women as only able to speak in public if they get permission from their husband. Mm-hmm. And yet, the same Christians will allow that, but yet they'll say someone that's living a homosexual lifestyle is living in sin. So things are picked and chosen. And of course, most of the time, the leadership is some male hierarchy somewhere, So it's very, very interesting that you mentioned the homosexuality and living in sin. So I actually watched a movie called 1946. It's an up and coming movie. I believe that it's won some awards, but it's not been released to like everybody yet. And I've been following it on Instagram, and it has been fascinating. And they've done research, they've delved in, and it's all about the word homosexuality and homosexual and when it first appeared in the Bible. We look at the Bible today as being this book of, it's God's word, it's written, it's never been changed. But actually the reality is that I think it was 1946 was the first time that homosexual appeared in the Bible. It had never been in earlier editions of the Bible. Interesting.
And it went through the whole thing of how this actually happened. And I think the short version of it, and I do apologize to the creators of this movie because I know that I'm not going to get all of this precise, but the general sort of gist of it and the general overview is there was a translation from maybe the Bible's original language, which I can't remember, I think was
well, the Torah or the Old Testament was all written in Hebrew. The New Testament was in Greek. But here's the thing, right, with even this, the King James version of the Gospels, the New Testament, Old Testament, these records were changed and obviously written by hand and translated over and over again numerous times. And they don't have a lot of the original records. And so the way things have been translated has been through the human mind.
Yeah. And actually, whenever it comes to the entrance of the word homosexual in the Bible, it actually ended up, there was a group of men and religious leaders, men sitting around a table, and they had looked at the translation and they said, well, we don't know exactly what this word is, but we think it might mean this. And then they just put it in, and there you go. The new publication of the Bible is out there. Mm-hmm. So there was records and documents and conversations. They actually, I think, had a conversation or spoke to someone that was involved in this process. It was just phenomenal to see that, and it really puts into context that actually the Bible isn't necessarily something that we should be listening to word for word. It's some guidance. There's a lot of metaphors. There's a lot of symbolism, but so much of it, maybe we embrace a little bit too literally. And, it does open up that other door that you mentioned about how there will be people who will use that to judge people, to critique people, to take their power away. And that isn't what it was intended to be. It's not a rule book. It's not, a way to judge people or, so it's really fascinating to hear you talk about it in that way, because I
grew up as a conservative Christian, and I've read the Bible cover to cover many times. I'm very familiar with doctrine and the Old and New Testament, and my understanding has been, actually, funny enough, you'll laugh at this. My biggest troll base online is conservative Christians, because you threaten someone's reality of or perception of how they see the world, they will retaliate. Wayne Dyer talked about this concept. You squeeze a lemon, you get lemon juice. So really, when something's under pressure, they really show what is inside. I've seen so much trolling and hate from the perceived Christian community because of the things that I say. Dolores Cannon faced the same ridicule. But what I'm encouraged by with this dawning of the age of Aquarius is all of these systems of domination and control and, putting an ownership on Jesus and the way he is supposedly perceived. It's all changing at a rapid rate, and we've seen a huge diminishment with the power of the Catholic Church, even some of the other denominations, and we're seeing them evolve. I think we're only at the beginning stages. I'd love to hear what you have to say from a psychic point of view of the role of the Church in, say, 10 or 20 years' time.
So I have been shown the fall of the Catholic Church. So I have really seen it completely falling apart. Whenever I'm shown someone like me, I was being shown myself in the future and how I would form a part in, I suppose, spirituality and religious beliefs. Because although I was raised as a Christian, I wasn't necessarily very strict. Like, we weren't in a very strict Christian family, but I was certainly raised with the belief of Christianity. However, I don't really ever remember believing in God. I didn't really have a belief in God until I embraced my mediumship, which is very, people find very baffling. Whenever I first started down that path and the experiences that I was having and the connections that I was forming, and God had actually come to me on a number of occasions. And I think that my thought was, okay, well, God is a person, God is a man. And that was sort of how I thought of it. But the energy, it's an energy, like Dolores talks about it as an energy. And actually, out of the, maybe 4 or 5 times that I have connected with who I think is God and who comes to me pretending to be God or stating that they're God, they come in a way where I'm not expecting them to appear to me. I think we have this image of God maybe is in our mind as being something, like a 6-foot tall man with dark hair.
Well, I always arrive at this, right? I always think, look, okay, God's supposed to be a dude, right? Of course he was going to be a dude, and I'm sure he's a white dude with, a beard, and it's probably grey, and he's probably old. But I've always been fascinated to know what he would do with his anatomy. What's he going to do with those body parts? Is he going to, get with somebody else? I mean, the whole notion is quite primitive, and yet this was said to me. I don't want to judge. A lot of us have been brought up with religion, and you probably brought up as a Protestant, being there in Northern Ireland, I would presume, and you've seen the troubles that religion has caused with certainly the divide in your part of the world, but you've probably even noticed this, and I was recently in Northern Ireland, just how religion is becoming more and more irrelevant. And of course, it's intertwined with politics, but even that is diminishing. And so, and you probably grew up, I'm not sure if you're quite old enough, if you remember the troubles, but you would know all about it, of course, being from Northern Ireland.
Believe it or not, Paul, I'm going to be 40 in a couple of weeks. So I can remember.
Well, guess what? I'm older than you, so there we go.
So whenever I go back, because I've been living in England now for 18 years.
Oh,
so
right. Okay.
pretty much half of my life has been in England, but
Nice.
I lived in Northern Ireland and I was brought up in Northern Ireland until I was 21. So I was 21 whenever I moved to Northeast England. So whenever I go back to Northern Ireland, to me, it's like going back in a time machine.
Yes.
That's how I feel. So I know that you're saying that religion is maybe less relevant, and perhaps it is to some extent compared to what it was whenever I was younger. But actually, you still go home and there might be a billboard with a Bible verse on it.
Yeah.
And that was actually one of the things that really blew my mind whenever I went back, because we wouldn't get that in England. It's not something that we would find. Religion doesn't necessarily dominate. But certainly whenever I was growing up, women didn't go to funerals. That's a really interesting thing. So women wouldn't have went to funerals. It wasn't the done thing. You went to church on a Sunday, or you went to Sunday school on a Sunday, because that was what people did. You didn't go out on a Sunday. You didn't wash your car on a Sunday. You didn't play in the street as a child on a Sunday. But yes, you've talked about there the troubles. So I had like members of my family that were in the police force, and the police force were sort of like hated from both sides. But I just could never understand as a child, like, why does this happen? Like, I could never understand it. I've always been very focused on building bridges, having friends that are, from Protestant and Catholic backgrounds. And it's something that I always felt very, very strongly about. And I couldn't really understand, I guess, as a child, why I felt like that. I guess I didn't really question it. But now that I'm where I am and I'm faced with all of these challenging things about religion and what it stands for and how God presents himself, and is it a himself, or is it just how we perceive it? And it just makes sense to me now that that's the path that I came from, because actually I know that that's going to form a very important thing in my future. So whenever we look at the future of religion, whenever Spirit was showing me as a spiritual leader, I will say, rather than a religious leader, if we take it like, say, 20, 30 years down the line, just for example, as I'm being shown as a spiritual leader, I'm seeing people in front of me that are Catholic, that are Jewish, that are Muslim, that are like, and taking the knowledge and the information that I share on board, as though like, I don't know. I don't want to give the wrong impression when I say this, but if we think about Jesus and how people listened to him and they bought into him and they took on board his teachings, it's very much like that. I'm not trying to say that I'm Jesus. That is not what I'm trying to say. I'm just cautious to make that comparison. But as I'm teaching the ways of the world and bringing this information through from Spirit, and bringing this information through of like, how we're supposed to treat each other, and, where the direction of the world is going and the sort of lives that we should live, it's people from all different religious backgrounds that I'm seeing surround me and listening to me. So, if we take Islam, for example, it's haram to be connecting in with a psychic medium, and it's not something that they should do. It's very, very frowned upon within their religion. However, it's something that they're really embracing, and I'm really seeing people leaving the churches and turning their backs on the churches. I'm seeing even now, my guide is saying to me about the derelict churches and the pastors who are out of work. So religion is taking on a very, very different form, and people are losing touch with the religion and losing touch with the Bible. I'm seeing Bibles gathering dust. So that would really signify to me that we're placing less importance maybe on the Bible and the information that's in it. And we're starting to question more of the information, because I'm seeing bits underlined and question marks written. So there's definitely something around, we're questioning more the information that we're given. And we're really focused more on connecting with source ourselves, and not thinking, oh, well, actually, I need to go and confess. I need to sit with my priest in confessional and go through that, you know, and that's how I'm going
we've
to.
never needed an intercessory between us and the divine. And one change of word I adopted in my vocabulary was I changed out the word God, which has a lot of negative connotation to it, to the word divine. And what I've come to learn is that the divine, the source, the creator, does not have a gender, doesn't need a gender, but transcends form, is formless, and we all emanate from that divine spark, that source, that divine. And the divine actually runs through every single one of us. We are aspects. We emanate out from it, including all the animal life, all the planet, all the planets, the galaxies. And so there is a oneness, there's an interconnectedness to us all. Quantum physics, once again, articulates this beautifully. Some of the other wisdom traditions better articulate that. I think the true teachings of Christ, of Jesus, articulate this as well. He said, you know, I and the Father are one, but also, you know, Christ is your brother, as the recently heard that hymn, "O Holy Night, Jesus is your brother." And so we are family. We are family in the sense, but we don't have the genders and the labels. We just use this, as you suggested, metaphor. And I think that the scriptures are highly metaphoric as well. And so once again, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, and we start to see life through a different lens.
Yeah. I remember because a lot of my sort of learnings have actually come from Chester Benson, from my connection with him. And it's almost been like an imparting of knowledge whenever he has brought information through to me. And then, of course, I learn a lot through the work that I do with people. And often I'm doing readings like on their past lives and things like that. And they're like, well, you'll never believe what, Gemma. But actually, I had a hypnotherapy session and it was taking me back to a past life. And it talks about exactly what you've just told me. So that in itself is evidence and gives me confidence that this is all real and that I can trust in the information that I'm getting. But whenever I was starting to form this connection with Chester, I can remember asking him, have you met God? Because I wanted to understand, okay, well, who is God? What is it like up there? Like, you know, and he started to laugh and he said, we're all God. You're God. I'm God. We're all God. And I was like, okay, this confuses me a little bit. And I can remember him taking me by the hand, you know, in my sort of my higher self. And I could see the vision of me walking along with him and him taking me by the hand. And he sat me down and he said, there's somebody important that we want to introduce to you. And he went, you know, this is, you know, you're going to meet God and everything. And all of course, I'm thinking of like this, you know, tall man, beard and everything else. And, the first time I can remember, I just had a hand coming out of a really bright light and just felt this very, very warm energy, just this. And I actually cried. The energy was so powerful. It made me cry. It really brought me to tears. The next time, I actually seen somebody coming to me. So I seen, you know, the energy forming as a person, because of course, once we cross over into spirit, we have no need for the physical body anymore. However, me and my human form and my human mind likes to see something. I like to think of like a physical body, physical parts. It's how I still relate to the world. And this man was behind a desk and I thought, yeah, so you sort of fit the bill of what I thought that I was going to meet. And he stood up and he walked round and I was like, okay, short stuff. Wait, like, where's the rest of you? And I've had so many different encounters with source energy like that, where it has really challenged my belief on what my expectations are. So whatever my human has expected to see is absolutely not what they're giving me. It was a bit like that particular instance was a bit like the scene where in Shrek, where Lord Farquaad is sort of picked up off the horse and sat down, and you realize, okay, so you're not 6 foot something, you're like 4'2". So it's very, very interesting to have those experiences, because I realize that actually the information and what I see and how things are presented to me is, first of all, symbolic. Spirit can take on any form that they want to visually anyway.
Yeah.
You know, it's completely up to them. They can appear old, young, in a completely different body. And also it's really been one of the lessons that they've been giving me when it comes to challenging my expectations and my thoughts around how things are. So rather than coming out and telling me that God is just an energy, God isn't like this, you know, man with the beard and the Moses sandals, I'm being educated and learning lessons in a different way. So I'm not really fully sure exactly what that energy is and how it all comes together. I haven't been given that information yet, and I would love to have that information. But as Dolores says, we're only given what we can handle at any particular time. And I appreciate that actually I'm just not in the place yet where I'm ready to fully digest that information.
Well, once again, it's that analogy of having that, you know, heavy, dense steak. You know, the way I kind of like to perceive it is, you know, I've adopted this word divine because I think it expresses, it also gives us a more of a positive concept of when we hear the word God. I think God can raise the hairs on some people's back of their neck because of all the wars and the injustice done in the name of God. Whether it's, you know, the God of the Bible or the God of Islam or whichever religion that has warred against each other. But I think we can all accept that there is this creator or divine force that is synonymous with life itself. And, you know, like when Charles Darwin, obviously from the UK there, came up with his theories, he taught that, you know, the randomness, the natural selection, that's all random. And yet if you were to say, here's a brand new vehicle, right, and it's intricately designed, it has windshields and it has a computer system and navigation, and if you were to say, well, that has just emerged and evolved naturally, you would think that was madness to say that. And yet, at one time, we believed that things just came from a bang and evolved and didn't have any meaning. And that became the new religion. And then it moved into scientism, where once again, we're cut off. So really, I think what I see is we're really beginning to combine the essence of what we would call in this community spirituality and science, and they're coming together so beautifully now. And so we live in very exciting times where we can understand reality. I was speaking to someone with a PhD about this concept the other day. Nothing is set in stone, even within the scientific realm, because when you get one theory and you expand the knowledge, well, you see it from a higher perspective. And so I think it's important in this age that we're coming to is to let go of dogma. What I'll be probably articulating in 2 years' time will be an expanded version of what I'm having this conversation. Hopefully we can have another conversation in 2 years' time, and hopefully in between we'll be having a more perhaps convoluted conversation. So go with the rhythms of life, which is growth, expansion, and don't get dogmatic in your thinking. I think that's where we get left behind.
Definitely. And I think, as much as people would say, but this just, there's so many occasions where I have given a reading to someone, or I've given them information and they've said, no, this doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't resonate. I can't see that happening. And I'm like, yeah, but you probably can't from the position that you're in. But if the universe is wanting to take you that direction, then prepare to have your mind opened and your beliefs challenged.
Yeah.
I talk about it a lot, but if someone had said to me that I was going to be a psychic medium, and I was told the first reading that I ever had, she did say to me that I was clairvoyant and that I wasn't using it. And I just thought, oh, she was rubbish. I came away just thinking, oh, she just probably tells everybody that.
Yeah.
So I didn't put any weight on it at all, and I didn't place any sort of importance on it, but I just wasn't probably ready to hear it at that time. Spirit were really planting the seeds for something. Yeah. So I appreciate that actually whenever I have a situation like that with someone, that it's me planting the seed. I'm simply planting the seed, and, it doesn't matter if it resonates right now. There will come a time whenever they'll look back and they'll remember that moment and remember the conversation, and they'll be like, she was right. But of course, when we're in that position, we can't necessarily see that our mindset is going to be changed because it's just beyond our comprehension at that particular time.
Yeah. And great analogy. I mean, by planting a seed takes time to germinate, and you water a seed obviously in the ground, and then it produces after time. And that's the very process of life. Actually, the same thing happened to me years ago. I went to see a medium, and it came as a suggestion to me to see this woman. She's no longer living, so anyone that wants her contact, she's not in the physical anymore. But she was the most profound medium that I had ever experienced. The accuracy of everything she said was just undeniable. So specific when I had a reading with her. And one of the things I developed a friendship with her actually. And she said, you can do what I do. And I remember at the time, I was certainly not on the path I am now, thinking, she's right about everything else, but she's not right about that. And yet now I completely see it. And so there's an example of when something is sown, makes no sense, and yet with time, the realization happens.
Yeah, exactly. It's just amazing. My mind has really been opened. It just continually is opened all the time. So we talked about timelines. I'm very conscious of time here as well, but we talked about timelines, and there's definitely a couple of times whenever I have vivid dreams. I've always had vivid dreams for this last few years, and I always write my dreams down. So there was a period where I was noting my dreams down and they were coming to fruition. So I was having prophetic dreams. And now I seem to be having dreams where the opposite is happening in real life. So I feel like I'm dreaming. When I'm dreaming, I'm seeing things that are happening on other timelines. And that concept really is blowing my mind. I don't really know if Dolores talks about that necessarily in our dream state, but I know that she talks a lot about different timelines and different, different outcomes, and our thoughts are manifesting our reality.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out exactly what's going on in my dreams, but that's really the only logical thing that I can come up with, that actually what I'm experiencing in my dreams is happening on another path.
Yes, absolutely. Well, she spoke about this realities getting split off, and, you make a decision in this now moment, the energy, of that decision, you obviously move down that trajectory, but there's an aspect of yourself, this is the convoluted stuff, that moves down a different pathway. Now, when she went into more detail about that, if that's the decision you didn't decide to go, eventually that aspect of yourself will cease to be. But there's this, let's say, fork in the road that's always occurring where we make one decision and energetically, because everything is energy. I think this is the best way of understanding most phenomenon when it comes to spirituality. If you can accept that everything in the universe is energy. Albert Einstein said this. He said, energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It only changes form. If we can accept that we are an aspect of the divine, we are a divine spark, we are energy, the very essence of us is energy, and then you can get your mind around the possibilities that changes form, oscillates. Think of water it can freeze and become solid and then become air. And so it's a much better way of understanding reality when you see everything as energy.
Yeah, it's funny because I have started to get these, although I see and I hear spirit, sometimes I'll just get like a light bulb moment, like a thought just comes out of nowhere. And that's referred to usually as claircognizance. Yeah. It's, a lot of us experience it, but don't realize that it's connected to spirit. We don't put any thought into it. It's just, we assume that it's our own thoughts. I had something just sort of fall into my head, and the thought was that history didn't exist. And I was like, what? That is like completely mind-blowing. So it's this whole thought,
and there's aspects of that are true, right? Because, you know, from one perspective, history could, or we've created it because we create everything in our reality, right?
Yeah.
I always like to say this, the point of power is in the present moment. And so we have infinite possibility to decide the outcome of our life, good, bad, or indifferent. You might be able to hear my dog in the background. I'm wondering, it's up to you whether you keep that and the listeners can enjoy my dog barking in the background.
It's a little bit endearing. I'm surprised that it's not mine today. She's in another room.
And the wonders for the audience of, we live in a time where we most of us have studios at home, so we have all these pets in the background that are warning us of all these of the neighbors. So,
or they're wanting their biscuit.
Yeah. When Daddy has gone for a certain time frame doing an interview like this, I get the barks. So it's inevitable to happen. My little alarm bell, I think.
Oh, well, no, it's lovely. I don't mind the dog barking at all. It's lovely to hear an animal in the background. It's just a shame that he couldn't be in here with us on screen.
Yeah, he's only 18 months, and once he's better behaved, I will certainly have him interact more with people. I look forward to that, but he's still in his training. So those that have 18-month or younger pets will know exactly what I'm referring to, because I have carpet in here.
Yeah. Well, actually, my little dog Rosie, she's about 2, so she's like a rescue dog. So we've only had her since April last year. So we don't really know exactly what happened in her early life and like that first year, so she can be a little bit nervous, but because she's part Chihuahua, she has that sort of nervous energy in her anyway. But yeah, it's quite difficult sometimes because she can bark a lot, although the more she's been here, the less she's barked, the more she's settled and the less nervous that she is. So it definitely makes a big difference, which is why I've closed her out of the room today, because she would have been too fidgety.
Yeah, she
might have been going onto the screen. Sometimes I'll keep like a little bed next to where I work on my table, and she'll sit there most of the time quiet. But on occasion, if there's a person breathing outside or anything, then she'll start getting it. So,
and animals, I'm sure your dog is like this. They perceive energy, people's energy, a lot better than we do.
Yeah.
I'll notice this, when I take my dog Louis for a walk, and perhaps there's a drug addict on the street, he will just move to the other side of me, because of the dense energy that someone that is in the grips of addiction. And so energetically, pets perceive energy better than we do, I think.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm very perceptive to who she likes and who she doesn't like. It's just with her nervous energy, it can be hard because sometimes she just doesn't like anybody that isn't me and my daughter. But I always think dogs are very good judges of characters. So if she doesn't like somebody, I do think, okay, what is it? What's going on here? What have I missed with this person? What do I need to be a little bit more perceptive
Good relationship advice for bringing someone on. You're getting them right.
You know, I can always remember there's a girl that I used to work with, and she actually had started dating a guy. Now, this was probably 15 years ago. She had started dating a guy, and she'd brought him home for the first time to her house, and the dog just did not like him. And she said, you know, I really should have just listened.
Yes. It took her probably years to come to the conclusion that you had straight away.
It definitely worried her. It definitely worried her that, you know, the dog didn't like this guy, but their relationship, it only ended up lasting a very short period of time before she realized, he's not the one that should be with me. But I guess I'm at that stage in my life where I have been so absorbed with my spiritual life and my work and everything that there's no men really come home to my house, so I haven't had to worry about it. Yeah. That's, you know, I know that like the day will come whenever, you know, I will be like bringing somebody home to meet the dog. And I just think, oh my God, is she gonna like them? If she doesn't, then all this time. So she can vet the future boyfriends, future partners.
Well, I think it's as I said earlier, I think great relationship advice. Just check with your pets.
Well, Paul, it has been amazing. I'm just seeing it's 11:11 on the clock for me here. I know you're in a different time zone. I know. But it has been amazing having you on today, and I could have just sat for longer again, as always.
I think we've got great synergy when we chat, and I hope we can do it again.
Definitely.
I obviously share this on my YouTube as well, and so my followers get to enjoy you. That's why I love hearing what you have to share as well.
Yeah, no, well, it's good. It's really nice to be able to share it, and I do just love that the conversation just takes on a life of its own, and we don't know where it's going to go.
And isn't that the way to be? You know, that exactly. I've learned to. You know, when I first started this work, I was very structured. I've learned to let all that go and allow the flow to happen. I don't read anything. I don't really prepare because I just let like what we would define as spirit move through us and what because I can't have the knowledge of what people need to hear. I don't think any of us can be omnipresent like that. And so allow this energy to flow through you, and it's a great way to live life.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm very much of the not preparing. I don't come with a list of questions. I just want to see what knowledge is going to come. And as you say, spirit move through us. Yeah. So we just see what comes out. But it has been a pleasure, and I just hope that you have a wonderful evening. I know it's a little bit late for you there. It has been great to see you again, and I definitely want to get something else booked in at some point in the future.
Absolutely. Anytime.